Welcome to Funnel Reboot, the podcast that shares ideas on how to upgrade your lead generation. Here is your host, Glenn Schmeltzley.
Hey, Glenn here. Welcome to Funnel Reboot. Today, we're going to dive into a field guide for how to do smart marketing. I just want to first remind you, though, that your feedback is really important to me. I would love to cover a book that you want on the show or just give you my sense of how a certain topic works, but I need your feedback to do that. So reach out on social or on our website or on our listener feedback line, 613-703-7073. And now to today's show. There was an English Franciscan friar, scholastic philosopher, and Catholic theologian born in a small village in Surrey, England in 1287. He is known for how frequently and effectively he used logic to break ideas down, solving problems that had stumped many of his peers. Instead of multiplying entities, he taught us how to reduce them down to their core essence. And his name has become synonymous with this approach, embodied in the phrase Occam's razor, named after William of Ockham. Our guest today graduated from Cambridge University with a Master of Arts, and he's been working in marketing, market research, and brand consulting for 30 years. He is passionate about using imaginative visuals to bring marketing concepts to life. He believes if people understand an idea thanks to a clever framework or a visual metaphor, they'll be able to remember it and use it in their day-to-day work. And today, we're going to dive into his book, Smart Marketing. And as you hear us talk about it, you'll see how it uniquely pares down marketing ideas to a few words or even no words, slicing them down enough so that they can be used to solve tough problems. And I bet if William of Ockham saw this book, it would make him proud. Let's go listen to our guest, Dan White. Dan White, thanks so much for joining me today.
You're very welcome. Glad to be with you.
Yeah, and I'm glad that we're able to talk about this book. It's called The Smart Marketing Book, the definitive guide to effective marketing strategies. It's a pretty no-nonsense title, and I can vouch for the fact that it does what it says. Let's first talk about, I kind of need to describe the physical book first, because I don't think it's fair for people to just try and take something like that. They might be imagining a dusty textbook or something. But so can you first, as you know, only the person who would have spec'd it out, can you describe the size, shape, and what's inside the book?
Yeah, and it's such a tactile book, isn't it?
Yes.
It's quite unique. I mean, this is part of a series of books from Lid Publishing. It's called Concise Advice, which kind of sums up actually what it's about.
Yes.
I saw the book, just a local bookshop, and I thought, oh, that's beautiful. If I ever write a book, I want it to be in that format. What size is that? It's less than half the size of A4. So a bit like a typical kind of small notepad.
Or a field book.
Or field book, which is exactly what it is. It's hardback as well, so it doesn't come in softback. It's a kind of cardboard, like a notebook or a field book. And it has, it's got curved pages and a curved cover and back cover. And it's just neat. And actually, it's even got like the ribbon that helps you keep the place that you wanted to mark,
yes.
and a bit of elastic to keep it closed and tight when it's in your rucksack as well.
And okay, I'm sure people appreciate that little bit of bookbinding background, but let's jump into what actually is in the substance of the book, so that people have a sense of why they should care. So the first thing that is going to pop out at people is the illustrations.
Right.
You have not a few illustrations. There must be illustrations on every other page.
Pretty much. That was the
Double
idea.
page spread. Yeah.
Yeah, don't there's more than a 2 page. It's never 2 pages without a diagram or an illustration of some sort. Right.
Right. So just bring us into that. That would
Yeah.
be far more than someone who wants to hire an illustrator for their own book is going to, put up with. You instead, I know that these illustrations are core to the book. Why is that?
Well, I mean, there's a few reasons. I mean, I suppose the biggest reason is I'm a visual person, a visual learner, and I have you've got the luxury of being able to see behind me on my bookshelf here.
Yes.
You can see I've got a lot of some of the classic business books. I really struggle to read them. I know it sounds ridiculous for an author to say he struggles.
Sure.
But any book that is solid text, unless it's fiction, I find really heavy, hard work. But I like to see things. I like diagrams. I like frameworks, etc. And so I've been collecting visual ways of understanding all sorts of topics around marketing for literally 30 years, and that's not an exaggeration. This is the compilation of all my notes and scribbles and doodles and diagrams that I've collected initially for myself. So I'd remember things, so I could go and refer back to things. And then later in my career, to help explain them to others, like a lot of people in their career, as they get more experienced, they end up training and taking on, advisory and mentor roles. So I used to use these, and people responded so well to them. I thought, well, maybe one day, I'll put them into a book.
And you have, and they cover the gamut. So maybe let's start with some of the most simple things that people have already brushed into. So the 4 P's of marketing, right?
Yeah.
We start. That's not in the beginning. That's somewhere in the middle. But the 4 P's is there. If somebody wanted to just get a typical idea of what they might find. Now you take these ideas, and it's not simply that you are replicating them. You will put twists on them, or maybe freshen them up. So I remember with the 4 P's, I think numbers 5, 6, and 7 come into the mix.
Well, I love to understand things properly. That's kind of what I do. I'm very curious about why things are the way they are, and so for example, I was taught the 4 P's way back in the early 90s. I suppose I came across. Yeah, I thought, great, these are great, and there are 4 of them, and that makes sense. And I can imagine that I love this framework. It's helpful. It helps me think about all the different ways, all the things you need to think about if you're going to implement a marketing plan. Great. Then over the years, you hear about someone's come up with 5 P's, and then someone else has come up with 6 P's, and then 7 P's, and then you see there are 2 versions. And you think, well, there must be a reason for that, and there is. There always is a reason for the fact that things are played with. And in fact, the best framework's always played with, because none of them are perfect. They're just little tools that help you think. And so if someone's played with it, it means they've engaged with it. It means they've thought about it, which is great. But anyway, so the diagram in the book is to help people navigate, well, why are there 4, 5, 6, and 7? So I've literally put the 4 original columns, the product, price, place, and promotion, and then mapped the 7 P's and the 6 P's, etc. So people can say, oh, okay, it's more of a subdivision. So, for example, the word promotion to a lot of people means promotions, as in, some sort of sales promotion or, sales activity of some sort. But originally, the concept is a way of promoting your brand, and therefore advertising fits absolutely under that P. So this is just clarifying that kind of, actually, when it comes to it, the 4 P's still is a pretty useful framework that covers pretty much everything.
We've had these concepts for 50 years or more. They're pivotal ideas, and as you say, they're also malleable. We can take them and put a little twist on them,
refresh them, like you said, modernize. I mean, the way we promote and advertise has changed dramatically over the last 50 years. With the changing communication channels, media, digital, etc. So that's completely changed how we do it. But it happens that this principle, is a pretty robust one, I think.
For sure. Now, there's also times where you're taking. So, in a case like that, people might just use, let's say, if they're a visual type person, they might just use the way that you typify each of those 4 in a drawing, and it helps them remember more easily. There are other ones where you are representing concepts like with charts and all sorts of flow charts and diagrams
Yeah, flow charts.
that cannot otherwise be explained in text, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah, I mean, those are the ones I enjoy the most. Actually, the ones where you're trying to, the way you organise the elements of the concept, the way you organise it, and the way you connect things, or the way you draw them, or whatever, helps to explain them and bring them to life and be memorable. That's when I get excited. And one of my favourites is a modern mix on the 4Ps. It's not meant to compete with it, but it's called the marketing mix eye, and it's shaped like an eye.
Yeah.
And I just love this concept because I always wanted to have things going across the top of the eye, and then the bottom of the eye, and then they combine in the corner of the eye, etc. And it just helps the organisation of it, and the fact that it's an eye helps you remember it. It's a mnemonic.
That's right.
Yeah, I like.
Yeah. And somewhere in a meeting that may be important, and you will be able to speak up, and inside of your head, is the picture of the eye, but you're sounding on the outside like a very informed professional marketer.
In fact, there's one of my favourites is actually an analogy, which you can use either visually, hence in the book I've drawn it, or I just used to use it as verbally in presentations and meetings with clients. It's the one, and it's actually as relevant today as it's always been, which is the idea of you have advertising can play two major roles. I mean, it can play lots of roles, but there are two primary roles. One we typically call brand development these days, and that is about. I used to use soccer. I use a soccer analogy where I'm talking about the midfielder in soccer. It's their job to get the ball close to the goal, right? Get it up the field. Maybe do a magnificent David Beckham cross. That's all the analogy is, by the way, David Beckham.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, and they get it in the vicinity of the goal, but then you have to have a striker right up there to bang it into the net at the right time, be in the right time at the right place, which we now call performance marketing or activation, etc. And
that's right.
Digital has a particularly powerful role, for example. So that I've always used that, and it helps me remember, and it helps the audience understand what I'm talking about, hopefully.
Some of these are simply unforgettable, and I think that that's exactly what you want to do. Is you've just made it so that even though it's rather complex, that it at the right moment will have import to that person, and you want them to be able to kind of. One thing I love about diagrams that cannot really be done with words is that they are atomic. They will come down just to that core thing. They will not, describe a diagram, just like a cartoon. It's minimalist, right? It is not showing you in high relief all the background elements. They're gone. It's in a void. It's just sitting by itself. But yet our brain looks at that and goes, okay, I can take that all in.
And you can attach things to it. That's the. I mean, actually, I use the same thinking when I'm talking about advertising, and especially brand building, brand development advertising, which is, the visual is incredibly important as a tool, actually, that the brain uses, or rather the mind uses, when it is putting important things into long-term memory. An image of that idea or that moment is a good way for the brain to store it, because it makes it easier to retrieve later. You can retrieve the image, and with that image will be the meaning that was associated with it. It's what do you call it? It's a shortcut, I suppose. It's an efficient way of storing and retrieving memory, which is what brands are all about and advertising is all about. So, it may not. The diagram itself should be a memorable element.
We are using the very things that we know our profession will use to be able to help us to do our profession. Wow, how circular.
Yeah, exactly. I know. It's scary sometimes. I did a post. I did a LinkedIn post this morning. Okay, you're going to love this. And it's a screenshot of an Amazon. The bottom of Amazon listings, it will say people who bought this also bought. It's the classic Amazon algorithm. What's made them one of the things made them successful. And next to it was Byron Sharp's How Brands Grow and Jenny Romanik's Distinctive Assets book, which I think are absolute classics. And it was with mine. I thought, oh, great. So I did a screenshot and said, oh, look, how cool. And of course, I'm using social proof, which is the bias that means that might actually get people to buy my book, which is kind of what I do. And I did have to admit it in the comment. You don't fall for it because this is just social proof. Anyway,
Right. Amazon did it for me, but I would have done it myself.
yes, it's credit.
For people who do, want to get into the brass tacks, there's a page, and I'll include it in the show notes on Dan's website that actually shows the illustrations and gives you, a really good sense.
Yeah.
They're a nice representation of the many, many illustrations that are in each part of the book.
And also the website has a lot more besides, because I've expanded since I wrote the book into other areas, broader areas. So the website is, people say they get lost in it. It's got about 250 illustrations, all with commentary as well. So it's like it's a thing in its own right, if you like.
Mm-hmm.
Or if you're a visual person and you're into marketing or business, then it's quite fun. I hope.
Yeah. So let's dig into the areas that the book covers, because while marketing is certainly the biggest part of it, you take a expansive, definition of marketing. Yeah, you go really broad. Sales is in here, measurement is in here, even innovation and product development is in here. So just tell me the story behind that, because that is quite ambitious to put all that in. They do all relate to marketing, but you didn't have to cast the net so wide.
No, it was almost a challenge to myself, really. It's like, do I know enough about all of this to create something that is a 101 guide? It's everything. It's meant to be a beginner's guide on all aspects of marketing in its broadest possible sense. I don't mean marketing in the sense of necessarily the marketing team or the marketing person, right? I mean marketing in its broader sense of what a company does to make sure that its products and services are strong enough to help the company succeed.
Yes.
Are attractive to customers at the price you need to sell them and make a profit. It's fundamentals of the way a company markets itself, particularly through brands. So yes, I wanted to include everything because I like to have the holistic picture, and I think the best marketing people are the ones who understand all of this enough, a certain level anyway, to be able to engage with all the functions of their business, including their finance people, because that's a crucial connection for marketing, absolutely crucial. But even the HR team, especially for companies where the customer service is a big part of the experience. Marketing should be able to influence how the brand, if you like, comes across. But it's marketing in that sense as well. So it should be everything that a marketeer will come across at some point in their career. That's the thinking behind it.
That's a good explanation. And yet, if we were going to simply make something that covered every concept and well-known chart, there's kind of two things that we would end up with that are not this book. Number one, we would end up with something that doesn't have Dan's thoughts in it, and this book definitely does. And it also would have things that are diametrically opposed to each other, because in a field as vast as ours, you're going to get that. And, just like we would see, for example, in an area like encyclopedias that include the humanities, you'll have, entries that are, this ideology and that ideology, this ism, that. So how did you boil down from a book that could have been, an encyclopedia or a textbook, and leave those things out? They got, they came off as steam probably, and what was left in the pot was something that talks from Dan's heart and something that is harmonic, right? The ideas don't necessarily, like, you're not too prescriptive to say you must think my way, but yet I didn't find that the concepts in there, had me, flipping back and forth saying, but wait, he didn't say that. So,
you're right. That's a very interesting observation. Actually, I've not had that before. which I like. It's got me thinking.
Good.
Well, it has got me thinking a lot because of a project I've been working on recently, which is to summarise the growth debates that the MMA. I don't know if you came across them not that long ago.
You mentioned, yes.
Yeah, and I've just been releasing them recently
You've been talking about them on LinkedIn.
on LinkedIn. Yeah, so by the time this comes out, they will all be out there. Also, there'll be 6 one-page summaries of all 6 of the great debates, including the next one. I think it's going to be Byron Sharp, which will be interesting. And what got me thinking is because actually there is a lot of contradiction between those 6. Apparently, well, superficially, there's a lot of contradiction between the 6. Some are talking about the importance of differentiation, of targeting, and obviously a lot of what Byron Sharp talks about different things, and actually downplays the role of differentiation and talks more about the need for reach and penetration and broad, broad reach media, etc. So that got me thinking a lot because I try not to have sounds wrong. I try not to have opinions, if you see what I mean.
Okay.
Well, certainly not entrenched opinions. All I try to do is triangulate everything I have read and come across and heard, and all the data points. That's all I try and do, and therefore, it's like how you built it. You have a working model. This, I suppose, is my working model of all of marketing and how it fits together.
Yes.
And therefore, for me, that's why it probably comes across as this is from the heart and it all fits together. It's consistent because it's my worldview. But I change it all the time. I've already tweaked the second edition of the book. Has already got some changes. My publisher didn't like that. They said you can't do that. I can because I've learned something new. So I'm going to change it. I've spoken to Byron Sharp and he told me what was wrong, and he's right because he's true. In fact, I joked when I launched the book because I sent it to Professor Sharp. I was stunned and extremely pleased that he took the time to read it and gave me some feedback and a nice quote, which is lovely. It's basically there are 50. I think it's 50. There are 50 sections, if you like, in the book. Yeah, and there was one section he said, "No, I'm not happy with that," and that's the bit I changed, by the way, in the second edition. Yeah. So there's one chapter, one section, only one of 50. So I did this jokey advert, 98% endorsed by.
Of course.
98% empirically based or something, because it's going to be empirical. So if there is some data out there that I've come across and I've looked, obviously you don't always know everything you don't know. So it's
Exactly.
not going to be comprehensive, but wherever I have, I've looked into what I can in terms of what's the science, what's the proof, and formulated my point of view, I suppose, but based on that. And if ever I'm presented with something that contradicts, I will accommodate it and figure out,
Yes, fit it into the map.
Yeah,
That's
changing
well, and you've helped me realize, and I'm a brief, diversion here, but it was a movie about the people who were part of Oxford University who were involved in the writing of the Oxford English Dictionary.
right.
I encourage people to check it out. It's called The Professor and the Madman, originally from a book from maybe 15 years ago, but they've turned it into a movie. And there's not a single encyclopedia or dictionary, I imagine, of any size that was written by a single person. Now, single contributors, had a very large mark, but they're all team events. It's a team sport, and so I really like what you said that I've done as much as I can, but I had to make sure that it assimilated with all the other things that I know. So it's the that was the forcing function. You said this has to have Dan's name on the front, and Dan takes sole responsibility for it, but. But the great news is the editorial team of Dan made it so that it hangs together.
Yeah, it's exactly that. It's precisely that. And I always thought that Wikipedia is the ultimate example of, isn't it? It was one of the first co-created things, and that were facilitated by the net. And I know it's problems because,
but it has its place, right?
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
I will go to marketing entries on Wikipedia, but if someone wants to have a different manifestation of all those ideas, they should go to here. And on that note, let's maybe boil down to, what do you feel in terms of the book? What would you say are the areas where your own personal stamp is felt most, or where, for example, I saw some illustrations describing things that I'm positive I haven't ever seen before. They must be, from the mind of Dan.
Mm.
So, are there particular places where you feel there's newer
Yeah.
contributions?
Yeah, no,
Uh,
it varies a lot by section in terms of things that are me because of my experience, my real specialism, if you like, versus me doing a lot of research and fitting it in with into a big model. Oh no, without question. I was most paranoid really about the sections that I knew much less about. So I spent, in fact, most of the time writing the
hmm,
book.
yes,
About a third of it was compiling the book, and then
right.
another half or 2/3, whatever it is left, um, was researching.
Right, and you turning into, I guess, a cartographer, right? Oh,
Yes, exactly.
I don't know what's over there. Let me go look.
Investigate and get some specimens and measure some climates or whatever. Now this has gone too far already.
So what would the areas that you say were,
Yeah.
the ones where you could just wake up first thing in the morning and then just start putting pencil to paper?
Well, there's a giveaway, which is I can tell you the subject of my upcoming book because
Let's hear it.
that's my sweet spot, and it's a real deep dive into branding, brand building,
Got it.
brand development. Yeah, because I got fascinated by branding when I worked at Kantar. Well, it was Millward Brown at the time.
Yes.
I was lucky enough to work with a fantastic development team, so an R&D team within the research company, big research company. And it's in fact Nigel Hollis was the person. He's still, and you may well have come across him. A very well
Hmm.
known character in this world. So I was working with him and some others on Brand Z, what became Brand Z, as in the brand equity measurement system that's used to value brands. So just try to understand. So that whole area of what is a brand, what makes a brand strong, how do you measure it, and how can you quantify its commercial value? So anything around brands and branding and the activities that build it, well, particularly advertising. I'll be honest, is my real sweet spot.
Yeah, and that was one where I saw some things that I've never seen before. For example,
Mm,
short versus long-term return from advertising. So you
mm.
show, and I guess the engineering people, such as the folks who do attribution, they talk about time decay models, but they don't show it. And this absolutely, like at a glance, you see what you're
Why?
saying about.
See why? Yeah. I mean, I spend a lot of time staring at graphs, literally, of trend lines of brand awareness or advertising awareness or brand image or all these things, and looking for the patterns through brand. This is brand tracking. What made Millwall Brown famous. And it's kind of like, when you stare at literally thousands of these, and you've worked on hundreds and hundreds of brands, some of which ended up growing and growing, some of which end up dying, etc. You're learning all the time, and you know what to look for, and you know the signs of what's important, and also you know what it looks like in terms of patterns. So I started to draw them. So I actually do a training session for the Market Research Society in the UK, where I have got lots of drawings of what look like trend lines. Obviously, I've redrawn them from
Sure.
to represent,
Again, the minimalism of an illustration.
distilling it down so you can see what it is. It's like my trick is that look at the troughs.
Right.
If you look at a trend line of, say, brand consideration or brand anything really, brand awareness, saliency. Look at the troughs after you do some. You might spend a lot of money on some promotional activity or spend a lot on advertising for your brand in a certain period or a month, whatever. You might do it a few months later or a year later, whatever. You'll go up and you'll go down. It's as simple as that. Things go up
Yes.
temporarily and then they go down. But they don't always go down to where you started. Sometimes they do. But if your advertising is working to build something, build the brand, they will go down to slightly higher. And if
Yes.
it's fantastic advertising, it'll go down to actually, noticeably higher than the previous trough. Hence, look at the trough. Don't worry so much about the peaks because that might be just because you've got more money or you've spent more. Or they can be misleading. The troughs tell the real story, for example. So,
It's amazing that you say that, because I find in our field the use of objects and prepositions. If I
mm,
listen carefully in meetings, I'm hearing people talk about those same things, but they've never been put put into a shape. So I hear things like, that's the ceiling.
Yeah,
That's the floor.
baseline.
We're looking at lift. The, I think people are expressing it. There's a desire in each of us to try and get what's in our heads
Visuals,
out.
metaphors. You just describe visual metaphors. But people are using words, but sometimes actually showing it is even better. There's
Yes.
nothing better than a ceiling, and a ceiling is always 100%, right? On a typical trend line graph, and that's kind of, it's like if you've maxed out, if all these phrases, if you're close to that, you're not going to grow anymore.
Need to break away from our conversation for a message about something that almost every marketer is affected by. Google moving us from Universal Analytics, or UA, to Google Analytics 4. After June 30, 2023, GA4 will be the only way to see our analytics. While it's called an upgrade to UA, it only takes a glance to know GA4 is a totally different product. Its data is all new, too, meaning there's no easy way to bring UA reports you knew and loved to the GA4 interface. Since GA4 only starts collecting data once it's installed, companies wonder how they'll get everything, both past and future data, reported through this new interface. Is the only option to make it all over from scratch? No, there's another way. All the web analytics data that's in the interface is also available in Google's cloud database. B2B companies have data in silo systems that could be combined with this raw data and historicals to see their entire funnel. This enables you to fetch answers you'd never get from the old Google Analytics. Someone asks marketing a what-if question? You can use data anywhere in your company to answer it. Visualize interactions with prospects to better learn how they like to be treated. Have people who always ask for the same data? Make an automated dashboard for them. The learning curve for marketers here is steep, but you can make this leap, working hands-on in a supervised setting. That's why I am leading a live workshop to get you there. The GA Fast Forward workshop goes beyond installing GA4 and setting up conversions with Tag Manager. You'll learn how to normalize data coming from ad platforms and internal systems and pipe them to Google Cloud. Google Data Studio will then present it in the best way for getting your story across. By working directly on the tools for 2 days plus post-workshop support, you'll become very confident in using them. The first workshop is in Ottawa this October. Go to GA Fast Forward for all the details. It's also being held in other cities, so put yourself down to be notified when yours comes up, or nominate your city to be put on the tour. Those who want to take advantage of the Google Analytics stack should check out this program by visiting gafastforward.com. You can spell forward with the numeral 4 in the middle, as in GA4, or the normal spelling of the words to get there. That's it for the message. Let's get back to our guest. Right. And this is where I suppose if we've been spending time where, let's say, the creative right brain people, have been leaning into this podcast, we might have lost some of the MBA left brain folks, but I think we can bring them in here. Do you, let's talk about the utility of illustrations. Would you be in favor if someone were to take, let's say, some of the, you have ones here that are processes, right? You say, okay, do this, do that, and you might have to do this recursive loop here if you didn't get that right. Do you think that those have a power in getting a team to be able to do something that the best written email in the world or, discussion that's held over a Zoom call just cannot
there are
do?
almost certainly going to be things that it can do that you can't do just through words and Zoom. Words, basically. I was thinking about an example. This is something someone told me. Yeah, a modeler, obviously. This is an econometric modeler. Well, he didn't just do sales. He also related perceptions to sales and outcomes, which I think is a fascinating area. I mean, it's kind of, if you get that, you understand marketing and you can start to quantify its effects, brand building. And it's kind of like saying, well, how do you build these models? And he goes, well, you have to have he called it a mental image. You have to have a framework, a model. That's what model is. You have to have a theory about how things are together. What do you mean? And he scribbled something down. I said, oh, I see. In other words, you've got to have a theory that when you advertise, here's a box of spend with a dollar sign in it or above it, and that spend has got to do something in the brain, right, of the your target audience. Right, what's that? That's a perception. Okay, it might be perception, just saliency of the brand. Okay, so saliency, and he puts another box around it, and he draws an arrow between them. And he said, well, the saliency, what is that? Well, so what? That's not sales. Yeah, but when people then go into a store online and they come across the brand, that's when that saliency exerts its influence on, let's call it behavior or purchasing. Look, you get the drift. You effectively are drawing a model and then you're testing it through maths and trying to either replicate it or find that it's not true. And then you draw another model because you've learned something from the data until your model, your picture, in other words, of how it all works is represented by the data, but you've got to start somewhere. And what I found to explain this to back when I take my results, when I do this kind of work as a consultant, back to the client, I draw the final picture. In fact, I remove all the correlations. I have it I give them the data. I explain that, don't worry, I've only put correlations that are significant and above whatever sensible threshold is relevant for that kind of work. And then you've got the drawing, and this is what we learned from it. It's not every bit of data, but it's there's a picture that we can go away with and go, in which case, I know what I'm trying to do. Yeah.
Right.
As a result,
right. I'm going to take these actions as a result
from the kind of work that I do. Yeah.
Very well put, and we have to allow the change. That seems like there's a part A and a part B to how those models are used. The part A is we have to first use them to figure out if the underlying data, is correct. If we've distilled something that describes the data and satisfy ourselves. But then, we shouldn't stop there. And I think this is perhaps one of the biggest things that the book can do is it helps us reconnect with how humans visually communicate. And it takes, no matter how complicated or quantitative these things are, it is possible to get the idea across to another human being. And, then we've, of course, multiplied the scale of labor that can be applied to it. We've maybe brought it to someone who is able to fund the idea, and carry it out. But this is, I think, in general, it's an area that we had slowly been, leaving as we maybe embraced computers more and just saying, well, look, it's just there on the screen. And I think the pandemic then also gave it, we took another hit because we all didn't have little, styluses and easy ways to
on a flip chart
do the same things that we would do in a conference room. Right. But I think, would you, allow that this is more timely than ever, that we need to come back into and make sure that we are using all the tools at our disposal when we're trying to get ideas across.
I think you can, pictures. I always think that phrase is very corny. Picture tells 1,000 words. I wish I could remember. There's an counter to that. Hang on. A picture speaks 1,000 words, right? A word can conjure 1,000 pictures. Yes, I think that's it. I don't know. I'd love to think it was me who came up with that retort.
Right.
I don't think it almost certainly wasn't, because I'm just a magpie, and I've God knows where. My memory's awful. So I really try and attribute when people there is a phrase that I can attribute to someone, which I love. I absolutely love. And his name is Josh Samuel. Again, he worked with me in Cantor, but I just give an intro, which is that what you're trying to, when you think about a brand, you need to think about, I've got to get this right. Yeah. What makes you think of the brand and what the brand makes you think of. And that's because that is basically it.
It's very good, yes.
We need to spontaneously come to mind when people are, for a particular category entry point, as Byron Sharp would say, or a usage context, a need, whatever. And when it does come to mind, we want it to be rich and powerful and positive and relevant and have lots of lovely associations that go, oh yeah, that's the right one. So that phrase I just thought was absolutely beautiful. And I use that in my head when I'm trying to remember the core concept. I've never drawn that one. I need to draw something that goes with it, don't I? Anyway, yeah, you're
Sure. There you go.
thinking about
Bit
my
of some
next book,
homework.
aren't I? Yeah.
And these things, we, as you said, like a magpie, we pick them up as we go. I think it's also important when you come to something like a book, and like you said, you have new editions that can come out, but there is a corpus of ideas here that it would seem to me that just by coming out with this and saying you should, if you're using marketing and you're smart, you should do these things. It's a connection with the past, right? Some of these things are age old, and we're adding on, but we're not falling into, I think I would call it the internet marketing trap of saying, let's throw all the old stuff out because technology has, changed it all. That's very sensational, and it sounds lovely. And I'm sure there are consultants. I think the digital transformation consultants are probably, getting some very nice billings out of that. but we have to be okay with the fact that these things have some tried and true nature to them, and we shouldn't dismiss them just because
absolutely. It's about reconciling. Things evolve and change, and some things turn up that challenge actually do make you need to throw away things in the past, or find the element of truth that is still true and keep it. And I'm desperate to learn, and I'm hoping for some engagement on LinkedIn when I do push Byron Sharp's summary out there, because I need to know the role. Half of me and everything I've learned says that having a brand that stands out from others in some way, is important, or to have some sort of specialism or core that is different from other brands is important. Not just distinctiveness, as Byron Sharp would have it, right? But but yet Byron Sharp has taught us so much, but actually so much more important than ever would imagine is just being distinctive and being salient. And actually being different is almost impossible to sustain and isn't that valuable anyway. And I need to know whether which is right, or rather, how do the two coexist? I think they can, and that's what the chapter I was writing literally this morning in my new book, which is, I think there's a way of navigating this that both are right. In other words, if you want to grow, you will need to appeal to more people across more usage contexts. Yeah, so you need to become more generic, if you like, more than you are now, right? But if you're trying to play a new brand and you try and go in and to a total retail and say, yeah, we're going to be exactly like all the others. Well, we're going to be unknown, obviously, but we're not going to be any different. We're just going to have, a bird with a whistle, and it's going to be really funny, and it'll be distinctive, and we'll spend, they will laugh you out of the meeting room. There's also a practical side of marketing, which is what happens in the real life. So how do I get to the point where I'm big? Well, I've got to start with something that gets me in to have partners and distribution and, people with me in a niche. It could be a niche area. But you should then have a plan. Okay, what's year 3 and what's year 5 and what's year 10? How am I going to expand from that so that I can continue growing? If that's indeed my ambition to be a big brand.
Mm-hmm.
So I think they are reconcilable, and it wouldn't contradict Byron Sharp's the Aaron Big Bass data. So this has gone a bit niche. Speaking of niche, I just realised.
No. It's I love it. These things can grate against each other a little bit, and I think where this is valuable is that client side marketers who only focus on one brand. This is, I think, perhaps the problem that they have that agencies, for all their flaws, don't really have. A brand side marketer is extremely narrow in the number of data sources that they're receiving. They don't have the benefit of seeing patterns across multiple accounts and industries. And I think something like your book can help them, because while there might be concepts that don't necessarily come from the same angle, if you portray them both, and I'll also throw in, maybe even allow somebody to use the book like flipping through, almost like if they were shaking one of those magic 8 balls, and they're seeing, okay, the book has this thing to say over here about that, and in this other section it talks about this side. But what they're trying to do with all those chapters and illustrations is to go from the general to the specific. And it may, at least for the problem they have today, it may loosen something and all of a sudden provide, and even when they're trying to make those two concepts fit, that may be the moment where something, jumps out and you go, I've got it. Okay, I know which one. And it really didn't matter that, we still have this age-old debate between different concepts. That's okay.
Exactly, but it's nice to have
those now, because now we know what we're going to do.
Hence, the book, it's a short book, actually. It's only about 20,000 words, compared with a typical business book or novel. Yeah, exactly. I mean, they're small.
About 170 pages.
The idea is it gives you that sort of overview and it's like a framework. It's the whole book's a bit of a marketing model, isn't it? A bit of a framework. And I would want people to have it with them and a red pen. So like you say, what's the book say about this? Okay, and you go, and then there might be that something that really rings true, and they've seen it already. They knew that. They go, okay, fine. And then another one where they might put a big fat question mark. And it might be places, and I'd love if it's true, where they just cross it out because they have come across something that absolutely contradicts it. I would love to hear, because then again, I can learn and make changes and evolve. Certainly the website, and then the third edition of the book, like, sort of thing as well. So because we are continually learning. Well, it has a bit.
It's taken on a life of its own, hasn't it, Dan?
Because I suppose that's quite self-orientated, isn't it? I want to learn certain things that I can't quite reconcile yet. And there are cleverer people out there who can help. That's for sure. So it's
right. You're like a modern, I think it was, W. Edwards Deming, who said, bring your data, and so I think
bring your diagram, or bring
your diagram.
Bring anything that supports or refutes anything in here. Because like I said, if the more you can reconcile, the more likely it is that it's actually true. The more data things the models fit, the more likely are, not to be closer, at least, to actually how things work.
So, and this is an old trope, but George Box, famous for saying, all models are wrong, but some are useful. And that's where we need to remember they are, I love the phrase starting point.
An orientation
that's
to
what they are.
Seems to be broadly accepted, or certainly, and if there's a debate, I try and call it out as well.
Yeah, that's right. And wouldn't that be a healthy field to be in, where there are debates going on, where things aren't necessarily definitive? There are, in the past, when I have bemoaned people that marketing's always changing and, we just got it set, or we can't hire new people because the stuff that they're teaching in school is, outmoded now. The common thing I hear back from people is, then you shouldn't have gotten into marketing.
One of the most
so deal with it.
Actually is a resource for marketing professors. So I've had quite a lot of contact and nice feedback saying, I used that illustration or that case example or that framework, in my lessons to help bring things alive. I've got a few. It's really nice. I love it when I hear
high praise.
That kind of the real motive. Let's be honest, a business book is never going to, make you a lot of money, even if it's successful. Let's be honest. So it's more of a passion project, really. If I'm being really honest.
But if it's giving people something that maybe even just starts them down the path of saying, I'm going to keep my own little swipe file of diagrams that I personally get use out of, things that when I've explained them, instead of hearing, crickets, I see in the
Yeah.
eyes of the
Yeah,
people
exactly.
hearing me that
I
they
mean,
get it.
the other motivation for the book, and actually my second book as well, is the book I wish I'd had when I was starting my career, kind of thing. The field guide, the orientation, the
Yes.
bluffers guide, if you like. It's like, often when you're newish in a career, people start talking way above your head, and you just don't know what they're talking about. You really don't. And you will learn over the next 10, 20 years or so. But wouldn't it be nice if you could just have a short way of going, okay, I'm orientated now. I know roughly what they're talking about.
Well, again, I think marketing maybe should pull its socks up a little bit, because the three-letter
Mm.
acronyms are overused. And I guess what's nice about it is we've been working with triangles and circles and
Mm.
squares and lines since kindergarten. So there is
Mm.
it's a little bit of a BS filter, frankly, when you have to put something down and draw it, right? And you can't just hide
Yeah.
behind, oh, you don't
Yes,
know what those
I
letters mean.
hope I
Oh,
avoided jargon completely. I asked my editor, who's my son, actually, to make sure that there isn't any jargon. He's not. He's a
excellent.
historian, not a marketer. So that's useful. You know,
It's well, and I guess maybe we'll finish on this point, and that is, do you think that
I have been
non-marketers
told they
would
would.
get something out
Yes.
of this book? I believe so. In fact, the segment that I particularly thought of would be people who are now put in charge
Food
as
marketing,
leaders
but they've never
over a team that
necessarily been in
includes marketing.
marketing specialists at all in their career. Absolutely, that's one of the sweet spots that I wrote down at the start of people who might find it interesting. I mean, I had some nice feedback from, who was it? I think it was one of my wife's colleagues, a teacher, who I gave a copy to, and she gave to
Yes.
her kid, he's not, he must be mid-teens, he's high school, and he said he
Okay.
just found it really,
Yep.
really interesting and accessible. He got it, which is kind of what I wanted. It's supposed to be comprehensible to everyone. I thought that was, yeah, and
Wow.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
not, well, it's
You've
not
covered the gamut.
simplistic. There's some quite complicated thinking in there, but it's not.
No.
It's done hopefully in an accessible way. That's the
Uh, yes, just even down to the paragraphs, and I guess it was because it's a small format. You didn't have time to get into rambly discussions on things. When you do have a diagram, then each of the headings, the
usual.
subheads and paragraphs below it are
Almost always,
usually
yeah, almost
directly
always. It's
about the
explaining
diagram.
in words to make sure that the use of the diagram and then the full meaning is clear. So they kind of go together. And again, the website's exactly the same. There's diagram on the left. There's complementary words on the right. But obviously, there's the luxury there of being able to link to other sources and references as well if people want to know more.
Sure. Sure, but that's what I think. What's great about that is that it kind of keeps a promise to someone. As with, like you said, we're going to get into a new thing on the next double page spread. So I'm assured that for the minute it's going to take me to read this, that I'm going
Yeah.
to be
Oh yeah.
getting just the
Just the
meat.
meat. And the other rule of thumb is I wanted them to be able to read it before they. I planned this before lockdown, but when they take off in Heathrow before they get to New York, they should be able to have finished it, kind of thing. 2 or 3 hours of reading maximum. I'd
Oh
thought.
yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. So, Dan, I know we've talked about it loosely, but if we want to just in one place give people details about where they can get the book, where they
Well,
can find
the
out
book
about you,
itself, I
where
think
would that be?
Amazon is usually your best place to go. Book Depository has it, but that's part of Amazon. So if they've got it, you can get it through Amazon. So that's the logical place.
Hmm.
The website is a good place to look. It's quite an easy address. It is smartmarketing.me, which is a bit odd because it's a .me, which is
Got
unusual,
it.
but it felt very me. See what I mean? Yeah, so that's
Right.
that's, and also that's got information about. It's mainly where all the diagrams and a whole load of other diagrams. I recommend the one called the section called mental processes. I think that's a lot of it. They're not in the book, but that's a nice build to the book. LinkedIn is where I love LinkedIn. Saying it's great that you can have debates. I think LinkedIn is a fantastic place for them, for the debates of the day, and people can engage if they've got something to say, which I think is great. I'm very active on LinkedIn. So just request to join me or follow me or whatever.
Fantastic. Yes, and
You're
people should
welcome.
do that.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for coming on. And to the listener, I know, probably had some fun in here, and I hope there was a little something, no matter whether you're left brain, right brain, whether you, like me, do not color in the lines, whatever you think of how your brain is going to convey these concepts. I hope that you give this a look, consider some of the concepts that Dan has shared with us, and that you use it to make your funnel even better.
Thanks for listening. Follow the show on Twitter @Funnel Reboot. If you like what you have heard today, please consider leaving a review wherever you get your podcasts.